Okay, so here we are, everybody. Welcome to another day at Sangha Live Daily Meditations. George is going to be supporting from backstage today, so he asked me to make the opening kind of announcement slash reminder of not just why we're here, but how we're here. I've taught a lot. Of course, I have my own platform that I teach from. But I've also visited a lot of platforms, a lot of other people's sanghas and activities and communities, and I can tell you without a doubt, Sangha Live is one of the top ones in the world, certainly in an online context, and the variety and the richness of the teachers, the different perspectives that you get here is quite unique. And as you all know, probably even more than me, it doesn't happen by itself. There's an amazing team behind the scenes that hold this all together in ways that you and I could not even imagine. Of course, I can imagine because I'm somehow in the back. I'm backstage with them a little bit, but they're doing a lot of amazing work, and that work does not happen on a totally volunteer basis. People have to give their time and their energy. First and foremost, they do it because they love and believe in the Dharma, and as we all do, and we just want to naturally share that. But it does take energy to keep it together, and it does take financial energy to hold it together. So, the Buddha taught that dana is one of the spiritual perfections, generosity, and ultimately, we're just being generous with whatever amount of awakening that we have that we can share with others. That is dana. That's the highest meaning of dana. But also, if there's any financial support you can give to Sangha Life platform, not only would it be greatly received, gratefully received, but it'll just support Sangha Live in doing more amazing work. When we support the Dharma, the Dharma supports us. When we support Sangha Live supports us. So today we're going to look at day 4. Before I go into the teaching today, I just want to remind everybody that there's one question left over from last week from Monday that I'll address today, and then we'll go into the Q&A at the end. And also, if some thematic question is coming up for you, you can put it in the Sangha Live form if you want, and I will do my best to give some attention to it. So just a reminder about that. Okay, so here we are, day 4, Thursday, in a 5-day experience together here at Sangha Live. And we're looking at fear, courage, and surrender, the path of the spiritual warrior. And it is a fact that as we do our meditation practice, fear will be with us every step of the way. There will be periods where it's not going to be there at all. In fact, we're just going to be flying high like a kite. And but it's just a matter of time that before it comes back in small or large ways. And this week I've been bringing these kind of concepts, but actually states of being from Zen, and more specifically in my case from the martial art of Aikido, to help us give us another perspective on how to relate with any types of fear. There goes my thumbs again. Any types of fears that may be coming up. On Monday, we looked at Shoshin, which is the beginner's mind. And Shoshin is basically seeing fear as it is, as if we're seeing it for the first time. That's the beginner's mind. Shoshin is seeing fear as it is. Or for that matter, the breath. Or for that matter, anything else that's arising in our experience. But since the theme is fear, seeing fear as if for the first time, Shoshin. Day 2, we looked at Zanshin, sustained presence, sustained mindfulness. Zanshin is staying with fear as it is and cultivating tolerance for that fear. Healthy tolerance. I mean, when fear is too much, we just close down, we fight, flight, freeze, whatever the case may be. But when we can stay with that fear, here it is, accepting it, welcoming it, staying with it, being with the fear in a sustained moment to moment way, we are practicing Zanshin, sustained mindfulness. On yesterday, we looked at Mushin, no mind. No mind is quite literally going beyond fear. No mind, no problem. Or I should say, no mind, no self. No self, no other. No other, no fear. And somebody, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. They wrote in the chat they're going to give a presentation in front of a group today. And they were talking about how the fear is coming up and how this person thought, no other, no fear. But there's a lot of others there. That's right. That's right. And in our practice, it's difficult to get to the place where others dissolve. Shouldn't say others don't dissolve. To the place that's impersonal. Imagine giving your presentation in a very impersonal way where it's just flowing out of you. That means there's no sense of self. That somehow, through a little bit of grace, the sense of self recedes to the background, and then it's just who you are. Your gift is just pouring out of you. In those moments, there are no others. It's just being shared in the present moment. And that is kind of a state of Mushin. We could call it a lot of different things, but Mushin, no mind. No mind, no self. No self, no other. No self, no problem. No other, no fear. Oh my God. Today we're going to be looking at Fudoshin. Fudoshin is the new, or is the I'm introducing for the first time this week. Fudoshin quite literally means the unshakable, the unmovable mind, the mind that is not moved by the ups and downs of egoic existence. The immovable mind, or the unshakable mind. Fudoshin. Fudoshin is a mind that it's not that it's, the metaphor of a mountain in the middle of a hurricane is a beautiful metaphor for Fudoshin. The biggest hurricane can just blow through the mountain. Just come in and blow, or tsunami, it comes and blows through the mountain. All the trees and rocks might be moved around, but that mountain just remains solid, stable. Now, so as to not give you the wrong idea about with this metaphor, it's not that your mind is so strong and stable that it can be with all experiences. There is a certain amount of mental strength, and there is a certain amount of mental stability that helps us face challenging experiences. But that is also conditioned phenomena. A strong mind and a stable mind is also conditioned phenomena. In other words, it is impermanent. It's going to change. And because it's changed, that's going to be unsatisfying. And ultimately, that's empty as well. So Fudoshin actually means remaining in perfect equanimity in the face of fear. I'll say that again. Fudoshin, the immovable mind, the unshakable mind, is the mind that can remain in perfect equanimity in the face of fear. Fear comes, a little bit of fear comes, the mind is unshakable, perfectly equanimous. More fear comes, the mind is unshakable, perfectly equanimous. Oh my God, more fear comes, the mind is unshakable. It's perfectly equanimous. More fear comes. What is the greatest fear? We all have our own top 10 list, I'm sure, but the greatest fear must be death. I don't want to assume it's that way for everybody, but that's my guess. Okay, loneliness, sure, but, sorry, I thought somebody wrote loneliness. But the fear of death, oh my God, here it comes. Oh, can the mind remain in perfect equanimity in the face of even the greatest fear, here's the deal: the self cannot remain in perfect equanimity in the face of greater and greater degrees of fear. The self can't do that. It's not possible. Why? Because the self is conditioned phenomena. It's impermanent. So sorry, it's just that's just it. It's changing. The very ground that we stand on it's not stable. It's going to change. There's no security there. Relatively, yes, and that's all good and fine, but ultimately, no. So equanimity in the face of fear is actually a high level meditative state, or it's a high level spiritual station, a high level spiritual perspective. And this spiritual perspective, this spiritual state, this spiritual station, this stage of our meditation, sankarupekanyana, equanimity towards all formations, or the insight knowledge, the intuitive wisdom of having equanimity or being in equanimity towards all formations, is a high level state. In fact, if you look at the 16 stages of insight knowledge, it's right before Nibbana. It's right up there before that awakening happens, before that very special experience that is awaiting everybody who is walking along this path. Nibbana can only be, the mind can only make the jump to Nibbana. The mind can only enter the stream. The mind can only cross to the other shore from a state of sankarupekanyana, from the state of equanimity towards all formations. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. The pathway towards equanimity towards all formations goes directly through fear. It goes directly through this kind of so-called dark night of the soul, these so-called dukkha and jnanas, these kind of challenging stages, the belly of the well on our hero's journey. So much to say about that. I'm going to save that one for tomorrow. Dark night of the soul. We'll be looking at that one tomorrow. But just know that it's post. That equanimity towards all formations happens after that. It's a bit of a climb, but we get there. Your practice will get there. So let's look at the 5 aggregates. Let's look at where fear exists and in relationship to the immovable mind or the unshakable mind. 5 aggregates is a basic foundational Buddhist teaching. These are, I'm seeing a lot of questions come up. I'm not gonna even look at the questions until after our meditation. And I just want to kind of say this one last piece before we go into sitting together. And this last piece that I'm talking about is going to relate directly to our meditation practice. The 5 aggregates are the Buddhist perspective of what it is to be a human being. More specifically, it's out of Abhidhamma. I know it's actually out of the suttas as well, but they go into it deeply in Buddhist psychology. And a human being is made up of 5 things, and only 5 things. No more, no less. You take away one of these things, it's not a human being. Add something to it, it's also, well, it just isn't the case. The 5 aggregates, these 5 parts that make up a whole of what we call human being, are none other than the body. Oh my God, sorry. Go away. The body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness itself. So the body is that's obvious, that's physical, that's who we are on a physical level. Includes our brain, includes our everything in the body, all the juices and muscles and skin and hair and all that stuff, everything physical, that's the body. Feelings is the effect of an experience. We're going to feel pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Every human being has that. Every living being has that. Every living being with a body will have that. So that's the second part of being a human being. The third aggregate of the third of the 5 aggregates is perceptions. Our sight, our hearing, our smell, our taste, and our touch. We all have that. Some of us are actually impaired in maybe one of those, but we all have something there. Even Helen Keller, the amazing Helen Keller, she had some senses, not much. She had the touch, actually, and her mind. It's a beautiful story, her story. It's another story, but some of the senses weren't working, others were. So we are comprised of sense doors. Mental formations is everything that arises in our mind, the functioning of the mind, including concepts, thoughts, planning, images, memories, dreams, all of this stuff is just formations that arise in the mind. And finally, the fifth of the five aggregates is consciousness itself. These are the five things that make up a human being. And when we meditate, whatever you're observing in your meditation, it's going to be one of those five things, no more, no less. That's the field of experience. That's the field of practice. That's the field where our mindfulness. The body is the grossest. Feelings are a little bit more subtle. Perceptions are even more subtle. When I say subtle, it takes a more refined meditative mind to actually take these as objects. Perceptions are more subtle. Mental formations are even more subtle. And consciousness is highly, highly, highly refined. But consciousness can be taken as an object of mindfulness meditation. Now, here's the deal. All five of these aggregates, they're all conditioned phenomena. They are all conditioned phenomena. What does that mean? It means that they are all impermanent, that they're going to change. That because they're changing, they're all ultimately unsatisfying. That's the dukkha, anicca, and dukkha. And finally, when those go and when we cycle through that, we come to anatta. We see directly in our own experience, they are empty. And in that anatta moment, that phase, and this kind of happens as you get into the middle stages of the meditation practice, this starts to come online, just kind of seeing more and more anatta. A lot of dukkha there still, a lot of change there still, but you start to have glimpses of anatta. Then you start to have experiences where there's no fear, where fear just doesn't exist because there's nothing there. Every one of these five aggregates, the body, the feelings, the perceptions, the mental formations and consciousness itself, all five of these are conditioned phenomena, which means they're impermanent, unsatisfactory, and empty. All five of these are shakeable. Remember, Fudoshin is the immovable mind, the unshakable mind. Every single aspect of our experience, including consciousness itself, is shakeable. Oh my God. That means, and by the way, those five aspects of our experience is exactly where ego, our sense of self, is rooted in something that is ultimately shakeable, conditioned phenomena. Hello, fear. Oh my God, fear. That's where fear comes from. It doesn't come from the lions and tigers and bears. It also comes from the lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. But at the most basic level, in one way to say it, and forgive this phrase, but us human beings, we are screwed because what we think is ain't. And that's a fact. Yeah, again, forgive my language. But we all know that. Everybody knows that. And that's where the most fundamental fear exists. Now, as we process through that, we will come to going through the dark night of the soul, which starts off with the insight knowledge of fear, like a wholesome fear, not the unwholesome types of fear. And there are a million different forms. But the one wholesome fear is seeing that existentially, we're standing on nothing. That's hard to take. It's hard for the system to take at the beginning. But as we pass through that, and our meditation practice will take us to it, it'll take us in, and it'll also take us through. Then we can arrive on the other side where we have Sankaruta where there is actual Fudoshin, actual immovable mind in the face of fear. So today in our meditation, which we're going to do right now, I would like you to, I'm going to do I'll try to do a shorter guidance. As usual, I try to do a short guidance. But we're going to walk through the aggregates and just recognize where these five parts of ourself, our field of practice, our field of observation, our field of objects, are solid, and also recognize where they're conditioned, where they're changing. They're not as solid as we thought. Okay, That's going to be the practice today. And should any fear arise, also be very, 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 very sure to welcome it, accept it, practice acceptance with the fear. Okay? Taking your seat, finding your comfortable position, but not too comfortable. Finding a straight spine, but not too rigid. Settling into Goldilocks zone of meditation. And bring your attention inward, first and foremost, to the body. Feel the body. Allow any predominant sensations or experiences in the body to arise to the mind. And just know the body as the self. And know the part of your mind that is observing, that is mindful, is not the body. Notice if there's any subtle changes arising in the body. It was stiff and now it's more relaxed. Welcome that. It was relaxed and now it's becoming more tense. Welcome that. Don't change it. Not in our meditation. We're just being with what's arising. Because you are seeing impermanence. Also notice if any unsatisfactoriness is in the body or if any unsatisfactoriness is arising as you're observing the body. Don't jump in to change it. I mean, if it's too intense, you can always regulate a bit, but we want to tolerate that. Be with it because what we are seeing is the truth of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. And as you stay with the body, should you feel a sudden shift into expansiveness or spaciousness or timelessness or selflessness, these experiences do arise from time to time. Not so much at the beginning, certainly more on the deep end of the pool. But should this arise, know that you are experiencing anatta, non-self. And from there, notice how the mind that observes is unshakable. The same practice with our feelings. Just kind of generally notice if we're more in a pleasant state, more in an unpleasant state, or more in a neutral state. And notice how that shakes the mind-body system. Pleasantness could either lead to excitement or attachment, rather than simply being. Unpleasantness can lead to the mind jumping in to control or regulate or change or do anything but accept the reality of the unpleasantness. And a neutral state just doesn't really register for the mind, so it can arise as a little bit of avoidance or ignorance or denying, not seeing. And notice how the feelings, as we cycle through feelings, they also tend to shake our system. And the part of the mind that can observe that, when we are able to observe that, is the unshakable mind. And the same thing with perceptions. Just check the sense doors. Maybe a sound is jumping to the mind, maybe a smell, maybe a taste. If your eyes are closed, well, there could be experiences in the visual field. But if that door is closed, then there's probably not much jumping in. And also sensations. And notice if anything that's arising in the sense doors are experienced as changing conditions. Anything arising in the sense doors are experienced as unsatisfactoriness. That sound outside is bothering me. It's not the best conditions. The ticking of the clock annoys me, or whatever it might be. Know that you are seeing the shakeability of perceptual experience. And the part of your mind that is observing that is unshakable. And shifting your attention to the mind itself, knowing your mental state, noticing the internal monologue or the internal dialogue or the internal changing of states, the planning, the regrets, the fears, the boredom, the worries, the sleepiness, etc. And if you are able to differentiate gently and observe these mental experiences, fully accepting what's arising in the moment, and through that acceptance, observing and knowing their conditions, knowing that they are changing constantly, knowing that that constant change leads to some unsatisfactoriness. It's not always there, but if it's there, know that you're seeing the universal characteristic of dukkha. And should all that suddenly drop away into a spaciousness of the mind, into an openness of the mind, into an impersonal relationship to your very mind, know that you are seeing directly anatta. And know that the part of your mind that's observing is unshakable. And should your practice become so refined that you're just simply being in a formless state, notice any subtle ripples or contractions in that formlessness that arise as conditioned phenomena. Know it as its change, know it as unsatisfactory ultimately, and also know that it's empty. And the part of you that knows this, the part of you that sees this directly, is unshakable. Allow the breath to be your anchor in the vastness of potential experiences in the body, the feelings, the perceptions, the mind and consciousness. And know your experience with acceptance in each breath, in each moment, moment by moment, breath by breath. Feeling the body, bring your mindfulness back to the body. Feeling the breath, bring your mindfulness back to the breath. Being mindful of the mind and knowing your mental state. And just noticing any part of your experience that is in change or any part of your experience that is unsatisfactory, knowing that it is all shakeable. And that the part of your mind that can observe this is unshakable. Feeling the space on the inside. And coming out of the meditation as you slowly open your eyes, feeling the space on the outside. And giving yourself a few moments to emerge from your meditation. Okay, so I already see there's like 4 questions in the question box. I'm gonna address the question that was remaining from Monday. Let me just pull it up just a moment. Yeah, it's from Mr. Sili Turok 71. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Anyways, this is a question about transforming fear. So this person says, Mrs. Ellie Sturrock, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Ellie. Not Mr. Mrs. Ellie Sturrock, I guess. Okay, so if I have it correct, Ellie said, there are people who have transformed fear into something beneficial. In spite of many years of practice, I have not been able to go down this rather splendid road. Any ideas? Fear makes me get a bit angry and confrontational. I can relate to that. A climate of fear, injustice, and politics causing. I can relate to that too. Well, we all know about this, but even at home, conversations in small areas of stress, there's fear too. So transforming fear into something beneficial. Well, I would say first and foremost, Ellie, if I have your name correctly, I would say first and foremost that having an agenda to transform fear is probably the first problem. We have to let that go because we have our in terms of our Dharma practice, our spiritual maturing practice, we have our agenda. The Dharma has its agenda. And they do not always align. So if we are trying to be free of fear or transform fear, our actual authentic spiritual path might be leading us more and more into fear. And then we are in incongruent, in an incongruency with what's actually arising. So let that go. Another way to look at this is imagine a trauma. And trauma, and there's so many ways to look at it, but quite literally, it's like an open wound that hasn't healed. and it needs the right conditions to heal, and that needs to be respected. That wound will never be a gift for another person until it's healed. The only way to heal that wound is to fully be in the wound, hopefully with some wise support like therapy, hopefully with some wise attention like mindfulness. And then that healing process takes its time. It's going to take its time to go through. Once that wound is healed, then it's transformed into something that is actually a gift. A gift for who? A gift for other people who are going through a similar wound. So the transformation is not the wound. The transformation is the scar. So in terms of taking fear and being able to use fear to inspire and support others, we need to be kind of post-fear. The wound, we can't, speaking from the wound, the only thing we can do is either trauma bond or share, and support each other. But to really help people, we need to be post. So that basically means, don't speak from the wound, speak from the scar. Don't teach from the wound, teach from the scar that can actually help other people. And I mean scar in a healthy, healing sense. Same thing with fear. So let go of the agenda to transform the fear. Go into it with some wise attention, hopefully some wise support. And just as the path of the practice unfolds, it will take you into a dark night of the soul. And it'll take you through a dark night of the soul. And when you've gone through a dark night of the soul, you can help other people as they descend into the belly of the well, so to speak. We'll speak about that more tomorrow. Okay, I hope that was helpful, Ellie. So let me go to the questions. I think Ruth Phillips had the first question today. So Ruth says, I also experience as a musician in performance altogether, all one, beautiful, and not the negation of self or other. So I am quite confused by this. Maybe you could talk a bit more about this. Okay, if I understand you correctly, Ruth, you're saying like in musical performance, you get into this kind of improvisational moment where the whole group is just one beautiful flow, and they're all talented and skilled, kind of doing their jazzy thing, but it's not like it's empty, but rather it's full. So, anatta is often referred to as non-self. There's a negation. It's often referred to as emptiness, but it can also be experienced as fullness. A flow state like musicians can experience, like we experience in martial arts, like athletes can experience, like lovemaking can be. When we get into a flow state, like cooking an egg in the morning, whatever you're doing, it can go into a flow state. But that experience is not an experience of emptiness. It's an experience of fullness. But it is uniquely timeless. It is uniquely spaceless. It is uniquely, my thumbs. It is uniquely effortless, and it is uniquely selfless. No self, no problem. No self, no other. No other, no fear. I hope that gets to your point. So it's the same thing, but opposite side of the same coin. One side of the spiritual coin is empty. The other side of the spiritual coin is full. Let's see. They're jumping here. Where did Ruth's question go? Okay, next is... Okay, Ruth asked two questions. I'm going to skip your second question, Ruth. Next is from Jane. Seems to me that perception comes first for me from my senses, and that leads to feelings. So perception is more gross than feelings, or is it the other way around? According to Buddhist psychology, it's the other way around. For your own experience, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If that's happening more for you, then that's completely fine. According to Buddhist psychology, feelings is after it goes physical, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. And if you practice, the idea is that it's easier to see the physical, then it's easier to see the feeling of unpleasant, pleasant, or neutral. Then but that's more refined. But then as your mind becomes more refined, you'll actually be able to see perception. And what that means is, like, imagine a sound. The moment that hearing consciousness arises, that's the perception. The moment of the arising, like, I snap my fingers, the sound wave moves through the air, it hits the sensitive part of the eardrum. Then there's hearing consciousness. That's an incredibly subtle moment. And in that sense, it's more refined. Okay. I hope that helps. These questions are jumping up. I might go back to your question, Ruth, if there's more time. Eleanor Foster says, I feel like fear and ego are two sides of the same coin. Yeah. Sounds good to me. I can relate to that. As if it's not about how it affects me, it's really more compassion or empathy or concern. So if I'm struggling with some fear, I can't put it down. No, you can't. Knowing it's only a personal concern that might or might not happen, like a piece of ego, just checking whether might be oversimplifying. I'm not quite sure what your question is, Eleanor. Maybe if I get it correctly, if we are captured by fear, it's very difficult to uncapture or to escape that because it's what's arising. It's the truth of the moment. And the way out is the way through, meaning the first and foremost is not to try to put it aside. I suppose if it's early enough, we can somehow manage it and then move on, get on with things. But if we're captured by it, then being fully with it is the only thing that will kind of lead us through it. I feel like fear and ego are two sides of the same coin. Yes. As if it's not about how it affects me, it's really more compassion or empathy or concern. I don't understand what you mean. So if I'm struggling with some fear, I can put it down, okay, knowing it's only a personal concern that might or might not happen, like a piece of the ego. So you can put it down. Well, look, if you can put it down, that's great. That's good. I would say the only thing is just to check in how much mindfulness is there, because putting it down could also easily be, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Eleanor, but putting it down could also be denial. Again, I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but check with yourself. Some of us become very good about pushing fear aside. Risk takers like me, the fear, I just kind of go. But there's a certain amount of denial that allows me to do that. I don't let myself become captured by it. So I would just say, look at those two areas, and otherwise, it sounds like you're looking in the right direction. 4 more minutes. Okay, so Clive asks, hey Clive, how's it going? Nice to see you. Nice to see your question. This arose from me reflecting on the intriguing hot seat session you ran yesterday. I love the hot seats. How can those of us who are interested find out where we are on the path? And what is our own leading edge? The bigger question. It's a tricky question. So, some traditions, I mean, the path is something that comes out of the Visuddhimagga. It wasn't in there. It was slightly in the original teachings of the Buddha, the suttas, but then about 1,000 years after the Buddha passed away, there was a big kind of meditation university down in Sri Lanka 1,500 years ago. And a guy named Buddha Gosa wrote this book, the Visuddhimagga, which is kind of the meditation Bible. It's very technical. It's in the Abhidhamma. It's in Buddhist psychology, and inside of that, it has the seven purifications and the 16 stages of insight knowledge. That's the path that we're working with, that I was talking about, that I was working with yesterday. Now, not every Buddhist tradition, Theravada Buddhist tradition, not every Vipassana tradition uses that, and it's perfectly fine. They're using other teachings and other perspectives, and it's perfectly fine. I found the map helpful, but the map can also be harmful in terms of, if somebody's bringing achievement mindset to practice, then maps can actually burn them out. They can burn themselves out. They can strive too much in maps. So that's the caution that we need to be careful with. And, the best is actually just to do your practice and let it unfold without knowing the path. And then one day looking back and saying, oh my God, I walked that path. That's really the best, because then it's the most organic. But having a little bit of help and support from a path, from a map, can be helpful. The map is called the Visuddhimagga. It's the Path of Purification. That's the book it's from. And the map itself is the 16 stages of insight knowledge. These 16 stages of insight knowledge, a simple Google search will take you there. And Tomorrow, I'm going to speak about a specific section of that called metaphorically called the dark night of the soul. And also, I'm going to be teaching a workshop on it coming up soon, but I'll say something about that tomorrow. And you can always, again, a simple Google search, you'll find a lot of good stuff out there, a lot of good stuff. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to share with it. You don't need the map to practice. You don't need to know the stages, really. It can be helpful, but at the same time, we have to be careful. It can be harmful. And whether you're using a map or not, they unfold quite naturally. So I think that's all I'm going to say about it, Clive. It's a good question, but it takes a lot more time to go into it, and we just don't have that more time. Okay. So I'm going to finish actually on time today. There, that's the cue. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. Today we looked at Fudoshin, the unshakable mind. It was the fourth of the five Shin practices: Shoshin, beginner's mind, sustained mind, no mind, and now unshakable mind. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at courage and surrender. Fear, courage, and surrender on the path of your meditation practice. Essential qualities of the spiritual warrior. So I hope that today's practice was helpful for you, and I hope that it leads you forward, forever and always forward on your path to practice. Hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.